We're live and ready to do a video on the fly. Oh, I can share the screen. That'll be good. That'll be good. So I wanted to talk about the three expressions of the I am: imagination, inspiration, intuition. When I say imagination, I think this relates more to what Henri Corbin called the imaginal realm, which is a level between God and man, which purely exists in a non-physical realm. And these three expressions often come up as there's no trigger, there's no immediate expression of those things except from your mind. It's very easy to not be inspired or have any intuition or have any imagination if you live purely from a materialist viewpoint. So what are these things? Let's go with some definitions. Let's start with intuition, going kind of out of order. So, intuition is the ability to acquire knowledge without conscious reasoning or explanation. Higher form of the I am. Now, let's do imagination. This is mostly going to be based off concepts I've learned from Rudolf Steiner, who wrote in this a much deeper way, but has it's really informed my worldview. So imagination is the faculty or action of forming new ideas or images or concepts of external objects not present to the senses, also non-physical. And then we're going to define inspiration. Meaning of inspiration is a feeling, a source, or an idea that stimulates creativity or action. Right now, we're flying on pure inspiration. I don't have anything really going right now. I'm just doing this on the fly. So these three forms of higher knowledge are the source of art, the source of science. It is our faculties which reach into the higher realms of existence. Now, what's the difference between these three? I didn't really remember what I read off. So we'll start in reverse from inspiration. Inspiration. How I came to making this video today is sitting in contemplation, thinking, and then I thought, hey, these three I's are what the I am is. The I am, let's actually define that as well. We'll see who wrote this one. What is the I am? It underscores your divine identity and your mission. The I am signifies your eternal, self-existing nature. So, the spirit inhabits the body. The spirit is eternal. This is reincarnation. Your spirit will inhabit this body. You will come to die, but the I am will remain. Gosh dang it. You know me, man. We can't keep cigarettes lit for fucking longer than 30 seconds. So this is basically the source of all our creation in this material realm. It's the source of religious texts, sciences, etc. Why is this important? Why are these three things critical to gaining a closer relationship with God? Without these faculties, we're essentially machines. Gurdjieff would say we are machines, and generally in this day and age, we are. We're assigned tasks, we have goals. We don't have to create or seek them out ourselves. Generally, we're paid by somebody for them to tell us how to do it, how to actualize this I am. So let's actually do some of this. Let's do some more. I should be doing screen share, but we're not. Sorry, you got to stare at me this whole time, me boy. The Mundus Imaginalis. Boy, we're just relying on the first thing and ever in the search to do all this. So this is from amicorban.com. In offering the two Latin words, mundus imaginalis, is the title of the discussion. I intend to treat a precise order of reality corresponding to a precise mode of perception, because Latin terminology gives the advantage of providing us with a technical and fixed point of reference, which we compare the various more or less irresolute equivalents that our modern Western languages suggest to us. This is the critical factor, is that our language does not give us the capability in English today to discern between these different forms of experience. These forms of experience are non-physical. Boy, if you start going into Korban, it gets real deep, real quick, and there's no way I'm going to just do that on the fly, my boy. But I highly recommend you look into it. It's the realm by which the angels interact with us, and we interact with the angels, or God himself, actually. The angels just are facilitators. And these three expressions, now we're getting deep. Now we got to really work with our imagination, inspiration, and intuition. Why did I decide to make this video? These forms of wisdom are the substrate by which we're able to create novel concepts in this world built upon the foundation that already exists. We could easily exist without any intellectual capacity and just simply exist and love and be. But if we're to proceed on a path of spiritual evolution, we need to become directly connected to these forms and able to be able to hear our path forward to become more godlike. You know what I'm saying? And generally, you can't force these things to occur. You are blessed by them. As a musician, that's kind of the if you're writing your own music, you're relying on all three simultaneously. And if you want to be anything other than a janitor or a mechanic, you're gonna have to start familiarizing yourself with these three expressions of the I am. In fact, this is what determines the difference between an engineer and a mechanic. A mechanic works purely in the physical world, and uh, you may need to use intuition to find the broken part you're trying to replace. But an engineer is working purely with imagination and inspiration to create the concept, which informs the mechanic on how something is created. The I am, the I am, is a source of mentation. Many people would say the I am is the ego, or that's how they would see their experience. I am cold, I am tired, but these aren't actually qualities of the I am. And in fact, the ego is a false I am. Identifying with the body is not identification with the true self or the true spirit. It's very complex to kind of do on the fly. So, philosophy is playing with the true I am. One of the most powerful things I've read recently is the Pierre Grimes. Pierre Grimes uh, did classes on the Greek mysteries by Plato, and he does a great analysis. And Plato created a system within the Phaedo by which we can create archetypal expressions of certain gods by coming to understand their expressions. And without these, let's see now. So, archetypes are eternal Platonic forms of uh, expressions that never change. I think you could say Odysseus is the warrior archetype, or maybe the explorer archetype. But there's a way that you can expand your perception of the gods into objective qualities that are recognized by everyone and are uh, always this characteristic. You know, anybody can be born a certain way, but once they fulfill a certain archetype, they are in their representations of an eternal form in the material world currently. It'd be kind of like there's always the classic like meathead warrior lifter, and then there's always the kind of the monk who is always excluding himself from society and cognizing and thinking and processing. If we learn to work with imagination, inspiration, and intuition, and you have the comprehension of archetypes and the Platonic forms, you don't need a book for reference. You can follow the manifestation and expression as an eternal expression. The world doesn't really change. All the forms of, say, the mineral man, plant, and animal man are always there. And using the I am, we're able to expand deeper onto those things that always constantly exist. For example, we can take a leader like Donald Trump, and through his expression, we're able to deconstruct who he is and apply his uh, qualities and traits to an eternal form and understand without any external perception who he represents and who he is an expression of. And this can be done in the realm of higher wisdom to support our way of learning who represents what. And if you take this in alchemical terminology, you can begin to understand how sciences were developed, in that if you're working with an expression of water, the chemical properties of liquid forms can be analogically compared to the godly expressions that appear in these elements. And the processes can be analogically used, for example, in metallurgy, kind of the basis of alchemy. If you're refining an element and you cook or put into the crucible certain elements and melt it down, they will appear in levels. You're going to have in solids, or the most high temperature elements will remain solid, and slowly the liquids or the less densely formed materials will rise to the surface, and then you separate that off, and then you get more and more concentrated. You take the impurities off the top, separate it until you have just iron and not all the other component materials that come in iron laden rock. Whether that is they sink to the bottom or to the top, or however that mechanism works, this can be applied to the psychological realm. In the psychological realm, we often have to work through incredible amounts of chaff and junk and through refinement, we can more properly express the I am, separating our soul from the body and developing the true godly archetypes in the inspiration, intuition, and imagination we develop in the mind. Since we're talking about it, let's see what Rudolf Steiner says about this. That's where this all came from for me. Now, actually, a good teacher, Douglas Gabriel. Well, that's a strange photo of him. Douglas Gabriel speaks about moral intuition, moral imagination, and moral inspiration. And that's where we understand whether we should do something or not. For example, we could create scenarios in which humanity, this is through the internet, we're able to craft what people see and think and hear through propaganda. And that is not moral because it takes away someone else's free will because they think that in their unawareness of these concepts, they're being taught the right thing, but the person who's producing the propaganda is using this to manipulate you into thinking a bad thing is a good thing. Let's see here. All right, this is coming from the Steiner Archive. You could easily check this out. The wisdom of man, soul, and the spirit. Oh man, that's a very tough thing to just be doing on the fly. We start by forming the conception of man as he presents himself to us in the present time, a being of whom, in a certain sense, he himself can by no means approve, with whom he cannot be satisfied, and of whom he must say that such as he is now, he must be conquered. Then, by the side of his conception, we place the other, that he feels he must strive to realize his own higher nature, a nature that would give him complete mastery over all that is in his present form he disapproves of. That this second conception cannot be classed as perception is shown by the fact that it does not refer to the present or the past, but to man's future. Then, from such stirrings, we combine conceptions that ordinarily, under the guidance of the world of perceptions, would not coincide. We bring together the black cross, a symbol of what what must be caused to die, and the red roses, symbol of the life, must arise from it. In inner meditation, we visualize the rose cross, a visualization that can only be called unreal, yet did not come into being like an external air, but was born of the noblest impulses of our soul. Oh, that's pretty incredible. So, in our day and age, we don't worship the red roses, the symbol of life that must arise from our material black cross, which would be the sinful nature and things that are not actually productive, but we do in a way that makes us feel better, but actually has nothing comprehensive to show that it is better. It's simply more illusory, more illusion. See, if you see a man shot in a firing squad, you don't know what led him to that state. He may be a political prisoner where he's a freedom fighter. He's a Palestinian standing up against oppression by external forces. And he would appear no differently than a man who was a mass murderer and stole from everyone he knew and was a complete demonic entity. This is where the I am of imagination, inspiration, intuition comes into play. We have then brought forth out of the noblest impulses of our soul a visualization corresponding to no outer perception. And if we apply this visualization, that is, if we give ourselves up to it in conscientious inner devotion and let it work upon us, we find that our soul expands in a healthy way and attains its heights not reached before. Thus, experience shows the soul to be capable of development. By means of a visualization that is outwardly in error, we have performed something that manifests itself as intrinsically right. Let's see, I'm going to do a old screen share so you don't have to stare at me while we do this and I can learn a bit. Boom. Perfect. I hope this is working. Yeah, cool. The next question is whether or not we can endow all that crowds into us through outer perception with power over such a visualization that has nothing in common with this outer perception. Can we lend it the power to exercise any force that will make of the visualization something different in our soul from what makes it of error, what it makes of error? We must remember the quality in us that has converted this allegorical visualization into something different from anything that could arise out of error is the opposite of what functions forcefully in error. We said that in error we felt like the Luciferic forces. We said that in error we felt the Luciferic forces. Now we can say that in the transformation of an allegorical visualization in the soul, in the wholesome guiding of the allegorical visualization to a higher aspect of the soul, the lofty stirrings we feel are the opposite of Luciferic. They are of the nature of the divine spiritual. Whew. Now, when we're talking about the Luciferic, this is very specific to Rudolf Steiner's perception because Lucifer is not necessarily evil or Satan. It's a very specific form of worldly perception that we work through. For example, Lucifer's responsible for a lot of art. If you're a deep listener of music at all in this area, you understand that that's Luciferic. It provides divine. It's not the. It's an a a copy of what is actually divine, and we get the feelings as though we're participating in a divine spiritual process, but it's actually evil, immoral in many cases. If you listen to heavy metal uh, or rap or anything like that, you'll get the idea. You feel great when you listen to it. It's awesome, but it's talking about evil things. Excuse me. The deeper you penetrate into this inner relationship, the more directly you will feel the inner influence of the supersensible through this experience of transforming and allegorical visualization. Then, when we see the supersensible affects something in us, achieves something, operates in us, then what had previously been more mere visualization in the soul, abiding within the soul element, becomes something quite different, something that we must now term a conclusion, such as the soul, as primarily constituted, cannot bring about through through outer perception. Excuse me, I'm having a hard time reading here. Okay, let's start that over. Then, when we see this, that the supersensible affects something in us, achieves something, operates in us, then what had been previously been mere visualization in the soul, abiding within the soul element, becomes something quite different, something that we must now term a conclusion, such as the soul, as primarily constituted, cannot bring about through outer perception, can only be accessed through imagination, inspiration, intuition. Nor can a visualization perform in the soul what has been described. Just as visualization, when coming into contact with the ordinary outer world, leads to reasoning, so the inner life of visualization, not lacking direction but amenable to the guidance as set forth, leads out beyond visualization itself and transforms it. It becomes something that may not be a verdict, but is at least a visualization fraught with significance and pointing out beyond the soul. This is what, in the true sense of the term, we call imagination. Summing up, when visualization comes into contact with the outer world through perception, it points to reasoning. But through the inner process we have described, it points to what we call inner imagination in the true sense. Oh, I mean, how do you understand this without reading every word he says hundreds of times? What a this is crazy. This is crazy. Oh. So that's imagination. It's visualization, we'll say. It has nothing to do with actual sight. This is a purely mentation perception of something that is non-physical. Let's see what else we got. Let's see if we can. I hate to jump. This is so interesting, but we're going to try to find intuition. We must ask, what would have to take place to make us aware of a movement of the hand or any motion of the body obeying the will? Another reality as well, the one that is outside us, would have to be able to enter our consciousness instead of halting before it. We would need to have before us a process such as takes place in our own body without penetrating consciousness. A process equally externally yet connected with consciousness in a way that we would be aware of it. We should have to have something that we experienced in the soul, yet it would have to be something like an outer experience in this soul. So something just as ingenious as picking up of the chalk to write with would have to take place in our consciousness, just as ingenious and just as firmly based on abiding external laws. Some external event would have to enter our consciousness, acting in accord with prevailing laws that would have the following effect. We would not think as we would in the case of actions of the will. I will pick up this chalk, and consider as representing one side of our soul life strictly divided off from something we don't recognize in external perception, but rather these two processes would have to coincide, being one and the same. All the details of the hand motions would have to occur within consciousness. Now that is the process that takes place in the case of intuition. We can put it this way: when we grasp within our own consciousness something that comes into full expression within this consciousness, not merely as knowledge, but as an event, a world event, we are dealing with intuition, or more precisely, with intuition in the higher sense, such as is meant in my book, Knowledge of the Higher Worlds and Its Attainment. It's a great book. Within intuition, then, we are dealing with the governing will, while that shrewd psychologist Brentano, yes, finds only emotions within the soul, not will, because the will does not exist for ordinary consciousness. It remains for the consciousness that transcends ordinary consciousness to find something that is a higher event. It is the point in which the world enters and plays a part in consciousness. That is intuition. That's pretty crazy. So, imagination is just a reverse of this process. You're using your higher faculties to you're using what exists in the world to inform your higher consciousness and developing from that, versus intuition is you're using your inner forces to make an observation of the external world. Pretty crazy, pretty crazy, pretty crazy, pretty crazy. Holy moly, this is an incredible little snippet. See if it comes up with inspiration. Oh, I see. This is so leading up to inspiration. Inspiration informs the spiritual life and is a combination of intuition and imagination. Because the imagination is an external event that leaves an impression on us, and intuition is an internal event that leaves an external expression. Whoo! When this has been intensified to the point of when this has been intensified to the point of its full potentiality in life, this transition reveals what we call the human conscience. All stirrings of conscience occur at the transition from emotions to intuition. If we seek the location of conscience, we find it at this transition. The soul is really open laterally on the side of imagination and on that of intuition, but it is closed on the side where we encounter the impact, as it were, of outer corporeality through perception. It achieves a certain fulfillment in the realm of imagination and another when it enters the realm of intuition, in the latter case through an event. Now, since imagination and intuition must live in one soul, how can a sort of mediation, a connection of the two come about in this single soul? In imagination, we have primarily fulfilled the image of the spiritual world. In intuition, event that impinges out of the spiritual world. An event we encounter in the ordinary physical world is something that leaves us no peace, so to speak. We try to understand it, then we seek the essence underlying it. It is the same in the case of an event in the spiritual world that is to penetrate our consciousness. Let us consider this more closely. How does imagination, first of all, penetrate consciousness? Well, we found it on the first side of the emotions, but though it enters consciousness, enters the soul, it does so primarily on the side of the emotions, not on the side of the visualization. It is the same in the case of intuition. Intuition can enter the soul life without providing the possibility of being visualized. Imagination, too, can occur without our being aware of it, in which case we have imagination directly affecting the world of visualizations. Intuition, however, is to be found on the side of the emotions. Okay, let's say that again. Imagination occurs in the world of visualizations. Intuition is found on the side of emotions. That's pretty crazy. And it's pretty crazy. Whew. Let's see here. Let's take a pause now. Take a pause now. This is utterly insane. Fucking 40 minutes to go through a couple paragraphs. So, anyway, I'm going to leave it there for today. That's